the thing, but yeah, you just have to be able to live with it.
Right. I mean, we've always, from a board perspective, we've always looked at, hey, we need 6 months worth of money. You have to remember that there were times when we went through where tax collections were late, and you needed to have the money because sometimes you didn't get the money in. So you didn't want to have to borrow, and if those fall taxes came in 3 months late, you're bumping on 5-6 months of money that you had to have. So we've been pretty conscious about having at least 6 months in our reserves at the end of the year, so that we could get through that.
General fund or ed fund?
Well, any of the operating funds, ed,
Any,
transportation,
so combination.
yeah.
Unassigned.
Yeah, not a bond or that kind, but the funds where you're operating your school.
Yeah.
Question: when you guys are preparing the forecast and projections, is there outside market data or peer data that you look at to help with that? So, what's the trend in property assessments? What are
So that's always the trick, right? Is like new property coming on, try to make that prediction is very difficult because the tax assessor is really there for the taxpayer. It's really difficult to try to make that prediction in terms of how much new property is going to come on. So we've always
history since I've been on the board. A while back, when we had the construction boom in the village, in both villages, but primarily in Orange, we got more new money because of some of that. And so you played that in a little bit more. Now, I mean, there's really not a lot of new money that comes in. So it really doesn't become that much of a factor. The assessment doesn't really matter. If it's not new money, it's just fluctuating with buildings assessments, it doesn't make any difference. You're limited to your cap, and that's where you're at. So we always have a small amount for new property, but not a lot. And that's been the case now for quite a number of years because the big boom in construction happened 15 years ago.
I guess going back to the question, because maybe rephrase it, is there any data available to schools who are preparing a budget to see what are other districts expecting, or what's the market expecting? Maybe from the revenue side it's consistent, but from an expense side, all right, well, generally speaking, the market's seeing
that's like apples and oranges. So another taxing district, their EAV is going to look different than yours.
How about on the expense side?
On the expense side, I think you have to look at the big numbers on your budget, right? Mm-hmm. You're looking at salaries and benefits. Mm-hmm. Well, you have a contract. If you have a contract that's in existence and you're not negotiating it, you know what the numbers are going to be. And barring a whole bunch more kids or a whole bunch less kids, where it's going to change the amount of personnel you have, that number can be pretty consistent. Okay, I mean you should kind of know that. Although if you're projecting 5 years, you're projecting at least one negotiation. Mm-hmm. Right, so you try. Again, when we do it, we try to be more conservative, more a worst case scenario when we're doing that. Although we've gotten to the point now of maybe trying to tighten the projections up a little bit, but that big ticket item is one thing. When you talk about special ed, that's a big ticket item, and that one maybe becomes a little bit harder to do because it's not just what the costs of some special ed are, but it's how many kids you have in the programs, especially outplacements. And I know you guys have a different situation now, but a few extra kids adds a lot of money to the budget, so it becomes a little bit more difficult. You kind of look at what historical trends you've had and try to estimate it based on that.
Probably a good way to answer your question is, on the revenue and the expense side, the most important number that we have that we know is the CPI, because that ties into the tax cap, and that ties into inflation, at least in some way, which districts try to use as a rule of thumb for negotiating salaries and so forth. At any one time, like let's just say, right now we know 1 year in advance. In January, February, we will know this year. So at that point in time, if you did a projection, we would actually know exactly 2 years of CPI. So we would know 2 years of what our cap probably is going to look like. and what we could probably afford if you're trying to stay within that for salaries and benefits. The one thing that has happened that's made some of the projections a little bit more difficult, although I think now having seen a couple, 2 or 3 years, we can figure it out, is that the evidence-based funding model that the state passed, the old state aid formula was real easy. You just plugged in a bunch of numbers and you could, with based on your enrollment, and you had a number that you could project. Now there's 27 variables and 30 some depending on how you count them. So you have no idea, because it can be a function of what everybody else's enrollment, low income percentages and so forth are. For District 80 per se, we've gotten very little money as a result of evidence-based funding model. We are in Tier 2, but tend to be at the bottom of Tier 2, and our percentage to target, meaning if we were fully funded, like the state says we should be, we're at about 85% of that. So that difference is the money that they haven't funded at the state level to give us full funding. So that's kind of where we are as far as that. So
just on the maintenance, on the maintenance and repair, is that like a general expense number that's rolled year to year, or do you go in depth and look at like useful life and things that are going to come up as far as
Like for the
expenses
facility?
for projections and things like that? Yeah.
Right. So what we try to do is do things a little bit at a time. So for example, our felt the heat in here, our valves that we try to replace 1 or 2 each year, so we're not replacing all the valves at one time. We know that we're coming to end of life on our Wi-Fi throughout, just because it's going to be outdated. So we have a schedule of those major things. Same thing with our HVAC systems. Those are probably your biggest dollar numbers. And so we do a little bit at a time, so we're not replacing an entire heating system or a boiler all at one time. There have been some incentives from ComEd and through some of the different energy companies, but right now what we've seen is the squeeze isn't worth the juice right now with where we are. Our boilers are at full life at this point, but because we put the money into maintenance of them, we're able to keep them going. So we're not at a point where we're need to replace them.
Yeah. I think as far as the projection side of this, we have a capital improvement line item that we use to try to identify. And as Tom says, we have things that we know, bigger things that we know, hey, this one should go about this, and we try to plan things. We try to do a lot of work ourselves. Pat and his gang does a great job with a lot of that stuff. So we're not paying outside people for it. We're using materials. They're good about the maintenance. Pat is really good about making sure things get maintained. The worst thing that he'll say, and that I would agree with, is you got to maintain. You got to maintain, because that keeps you from having the catastrophic problems and spending a lot more money later. And so, but again, so you try to do things. You try to schedule out some things so that hey, we're going to spend this money on this. We're going to spend this money on this. Here's where we think we're going to be, and we try to spread it so we're not spending $3 million in capital improvements one year and $100,000 the next year. You're trying to look at spending some to keep it maintained and to do things as you need to do them. As Tom said, projects that can be split into pieces, you try to do that so it's more consistent, and that way you can budget and project better, because you're budgeting for that, as long as you have a good comprehensive inventory of what needs to be done. I think that's the key from a building perspective.
Another question. What do you do? Is it monthly, quarterly, or how frequent do you monitor the results and performance of schools compared to budget, or what are some of the procedures and controls that you do for that?
So that's at least every month. So each month I present to the board a balance sheet so they can kind of see where the funds are. And then an update. We do a Friday letter. So if something happens where, for a while there, the state was prorating some of their payments, so we weren't getting the money from the state. Our reimbursements it was unpredictable, so we were trying to, make sure that our cash flow that we put together, our long-term and short-term cash flow, we're able to meet that. That was a little bit more of a headache in order to try to meet that. But at least on a monthly basis, and then they get that at the board meeting.
Yeah, that's part of our board information that we get from the finance every month.
And then back to like what I said, internally what we'll do is Skyward will automatically send out reports to each budget manager each week. They get that on Friday morning, so they're able to see. It does two things. So if they ordered something and if someone made a mistake and put the wrong account code, they know, and they see, hey, here's an expenditure that came out of my account that shouldn't have. They're able to catch it. But the biggest thing is, in your mind, you think it's like anything. You think you have a certain amount of money, and in reality, once you start spending, it can go pretty fast in your mind compared to when you see it on paper. So that's been very good with, they know that whatever their budget is, that's what they have to stay to, and.
So now monthly, you report to the board, and there's a board members who sit on the finance committee, kind of debrief the finance committee on maybe quarterly, monthly. Does that happen?
We have three finance committee meetings a year.
Okay.
Centered around budget time, levy time, audit.
Okay.
So you have, but you have opportunity. We call extra ones if we need to.
Okay.
We get the information in our board packet as far as what we were talking about, as far as the over/under budget. That report everybody gets. Everybody is told, hey, you have a question, bring it up ahead of time if you can, so that they have a chance to either answer you and leave your answer your question so you don't have to worry about it, or have some information that they can present at the board, especially if a bunch of board members have the same question. But that is one of the things that helps. You get to see that budget. Here's where we're at today. Here's where we should be at today based on the budget. Here's what we got left to go. And then again, the finance committee sits to go through the budget with them when that happens. At the beginning of the year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's also understanding, you're a big group, like our group. There's one guy on there where he can look at a spreadsheet and figure it out pretty quickly, and there's other people, they want the spreadsheet and they want to see visuals. So whatever, so that they can understand it and be able to make some good decisions moving forward.
So along those lines, is the annual financial statements, those are accrual basis, correct?
We're on a cash basis.
Oh, you guys are
Yeah.
cash
So are
basis.
we.
Okay.
So are we.
Right. So then, obviously, all the reporting and budgetary oversight is all cash basis.
Yeah.
I thought it switched to modified
Accrual.
We switched from modified code to
to
cash.
cash. Okay, that was last year.
And as Tom said, and I don't know if you know when he said we have a Friday letter, I don't know if you guys understand what we do, but the superintendent puts out a letter every week to the board members with information on things that are happening, with information that Tom has from the finance, in addition to that, athletic information, stuff like that. So we get, if there's something in there that we need to know about, we do get updates every week if there's something there that has to be known. So that helps from the standpoint you're not waiting until a board meeting, so you got a chance to see if something's happening, what's happening.
Great. Other questions?
Questions?
So you said your annual audit is Baker Tilly, and we have our firm does our annual, but knowing, I don't know if we're on the spot here, blindly, knowing what you've known about our district over the last 7-8 years, let's say, when do you think the district is warranted to do something like a forensic audit or re-audit previous years? So I guess I'm asking your opinion. Or do you think that's warranted, or do you think you just, now that we have a balanced budget and we're building some reserves, do you just move forward? Has Ridgewood ever considered doing like a...
I can't answer that question because I'm not really familiar with